So we're here at Alpine Archery with Kerry Burkheimer from CF Burkheimer Fly Rods. We got him to stop into the shop and wanted to ask him a few questions and get him on camera to get some answers for all of you. So thanks for stopping in, Kerry. We really appreciate it.
John, anytime.
I've been a big fan of your rods for 4 or 5 years now, and it's all I fish. But I want to know a little bit about the backstory and how you got started designing fly rods.
Yeah, you know, the whole thing started as I used to build homes in the economy tank back in the 70s and into the early 80s, and so I went from building homes to basically guiding part-time. Needed some good equipment so I could impress my clients, so and I didn't have money to go buy equipment. I wasn't sponsored by manufacturers, so what I did is I actually borrowed some money from my father and built 3 kits, put 2 in a consignment shop at a sporting goods place, and those kits sold remarkably quickly within about a couple weeks. And I took that money and bought a couple more, and that started the whole rod building thing. And I decided I really enjoyed rod building because I had kind of a construction hobby background anyway. It just fit with fly tying and everything else that I was doing at the time. So it was a good thing, and I was able to pay for, you know, fly rods. That's what it was, how it turned out. You know, I didn't have to go buy them. That kind of dovetailed into building a guide business at the time, just on the local streams. And then I started going up to a couple of the manufacturers. Lewis was one of them. And I'd be buying kits and things, but I never bought their fly rod kits. I'd only buy their drift rod stuff. Because at that time, the fly rods just didn't have a high element of performance. And it really bugged me that I wasn't buying fly rods. I was buying Kennedy Fisher things back when they were around. And slowly but surely, I was selling over 100 rods a year pretty quickly and easily. And they finally called me up and said, "Why don't you come in for an interview? We want to talk to you about maybe our fly rods." So I went in, and they actually interviewed me for a job for part-time marketing. And I took that up, went to West Yellowstone. That was a big deal. I met Lefty Cray there, Russ Peak, all sorts of people at that one particular show that changed my whole life pretty much as far as the industry goes. Came back, they hired me full time because they liked what I did. Now here's something, fly rod design. That's kind of the precursor, and that's that's been trimmed.
Right.
We sat here for 5 hours talking about it because there's so much that happened. So the first thing that these guys say is, well, let's go ahead and start working on our line of rods to really get them dialed. Get these things tuned up where they need to be. And so I'd go cast the rod, you know, line rod, all this kind of thing. I got them all set up with reels and everything. They didn't have nothing. And none of them were fly rods. And so I'd cast the stuff and I'd come in and say, you know, the tip's a little like this. And I didn't have the language to communicate effectively of what it needed to do. I was a good caster. And so the engineer back then would go and tweak the pattern. Then I'd go in there 2 days later, he'd say, "Go try this." So I'd go and try it. I'd say, "No, the butt's still not right." Well, this went on for like a month and a half. And I'll never forget, I walked in one afternoon, he just had run this stuff, and this is expensive for a company to run samples, you know, a big company like that. And I'm saying, it's still not quite right, you know, something's not balanced between tip and butt. The guy throws his pad down on his desk and says, "You do it." And I just went, well now, here's an opportunity. And I started designing from that point on. And within 2 weeks, I had something that was actually really pretty good. Well, 9 foot 6 weight back then was kind of the standard rod.
Right.
Now it's 5s. But,
Yeah, so that's the moment that changed fly rods for all of us.
Yeah.
So, when you set out and you have an idea in your mind about creating a rod, how do you go about doing that?
You know, I start out, it all kind of comes, and this is going to sound kind of strange or mystical or something, it's not meant to be. I start out with kind of a concept of what I'm thinking, and it's, you know, it has to have a purpose, and then I'm starting to kind of, I get a visualization in a way of how I want this thing to manifest, if you will. And of course, when you're designing something, you have all sorts of different tapers, materials, ferruling diameters. There's a huge amount of things to take into consideration. So it's kind of multi-dimensional to begin with, very abstract. And so I start with the concept, and then we start, and I've been doing this since 1980. So I have a lot of knowledge to draw back on. And in my mental filing cabinet, what's left of it, I'll go through and compare tapers in my mind, what I liked, what I want changed, and then we start running some samples of it. Remarkably, it can take, I used to be able to design and have something within 2 or 3 sessions, which was really unheard of. It's longer now, just because of some physical things that I've had happen. It takes longer because it's more painful to cast.
Sure.
And I can't go out and do all the things I used to be able to do. But I could usually nail it 2 or 3 times. Sometimes, other times I'd have to put it down. And some patterns I've had to put down for a year and come back. And interestingly enough, the light bulb, more often than not, comes back on. I jump right back into it. Within 2 or 3 tweaks, we're back on the road again.
Wow.
So it's pretty strange.
Yeah.
There's no timeline. I'd drive if I was working for a large company with it, not myself, but somebody else, I'd probably drive nuts.
Right.
Because we need these in 2 weeks, next year.
One of the things that I appreciate about Burkheimer rods is that every taper is designed very specifically down to the inch. You don't have the typical 7136, 7 weight, 13 foot. It's down to a 7 weight, 13.3, 7 weight, 13.4. Everyone's very different, and they're designed specifically for that purpose that you were talking about. And it's very interesting to me that you can have a rod like the 7133 and the 7134, which are the most common rods that I've come across of yours, and be such different rods.
Sure.
For me, the tip section on the 7133 is much stiffer, and it casts that big heavy fly a little bit better for winter fishing.
Sure.
But how did you go about creating those 2 rods so differently when it would seem that they're would be very similar?
Yeah. The 7133, which is a pretty old pattern, that's probably 15 years old, maybe more. Could be actually more than that. The idea was there weren't a lot of 7 weights on the market. We needed something that was lighter. We had the 8 weight, we had a 9 weight. All of those were selling well, so we started approaching the 7. But I knew people were going to want to use it for winter steelhead fishing as well, besides summer run. And so that rod turned out to be probably more like a 7.5. Very strong top end. The thing will cast a full fly line plus feet pretty easily with the right load and the technique, of course. And it kind of just took off from there. I actually designed it in the summer, and there was very little water on the Washougal River at the time. I had to find a big pool, and the thing just took off. I mean, it was unbelievable. When we did the 4-piece, and I guess I have to take a timeline look, and I can't remember when we started the 4-piece. It might have been 10 or 12 years ago. I didn't want to necessarily duplicate the 3-piece, because the 3-piece had a good solid following. All the 3-piece rods were known for very, very deep loading, thick wall butts, so all that energy is getting stored, and then it released. The energy gets released at a different tempo than the 4-piece. And for some folks, the 3-piece, when you learn the rod, some people still fish them even today because it's not outdated at all. The 4-piece was meant to be a little bit quicker in the lower end so that the timing issues wouldn't be quite as critical.
Sure.
And the 4-piece, I don't even know if I'd be in business if I didn't have the 4-piece rods, at least not to the extent that they are.
Right.
Because they're so much easier to cast. They still do the same job, a little bit quicker in the bottom end. Very easy for people, especially people that have maybe some shoulder issues. It's easier for them to actually load than the 3-piece that's going to be deeper. All that, of course, the deeper it loads, the more that your body's going to have the impact of that load or weight.
Right.
And so the 4-piece kind of solves some of those issues.
Definitely.
Yeah. But totally different taper concepts, different materials, everything's different.
Oh yeah, I mean, just picking them up and wiggling them, let alone casting them, you can feel the difference. And,
Yeah.
Those were the final 2 rods that I cast before I decided on my first Burkheimer. Though all those things that you mentioned were why I got the 7134 first.
Sure.
Is it was easier for me to cast. Timing wasn't an issue. But when I did get the timing right on the 7133, it went forever.
It does go, yeah.
It was pretty exciting, you know. In the last couple of years, you came out with two of my favorite rods. The 8152, which I fish exclusively on the Clearwater.
Sure.
It's just built for that river. And this rod here is the 6128. You released it in the last few months. And this is, for me, the rod that I fish on the Grand Ron now, exclusively. When I go to the Deschutes, it'll be there as well. It's the perfect summer rod fish, or summer fish rod. You know, I just love it. It's got an amazing amount of power for a 6-weight. It has tons of feel. I love everything about this rod, you know, and I sing its praises all the time. I can't get enough of it. Specifically with this rod, what was your idea?
You know, well, the history behind this particular model is that we had a 7127, which we still sell, but the pattern was changed, I'm going to guess about 6 or 7 years ago. And the original 7127 was really kind of a light 7, almost a 6.5, 6.8 if you try to break it down. And unfortunately, a lot of guys were taking that rod up into BC and getting in trouble with 15 and 20 pound chrome bright fish. It's not a BC 16, 18 pound chrome bright fish rod.
No.
And you know, either you're going to bust the rod trying to land the fish, or you're going to kill the fish trying to be easy on the rod. It just wasn't the right combination.
Sure.
So we believe in matching the line weight of the rod to the fish you're going after. You end up with good success on both sides. So is what we did is I kind of a couple of years ago, I revisited the 7127 and decided we're going to have to amp this rod up a little bit. Let's make this one so that the guys can take it to BC. You can actually winter fish it if you want, you know, and it's going to hold up well. And that rod came out quite well. That took almost 2 years for that to actually come through to fruition, just because of some issues. But in the meantime, we were noticing that there was more popularity in the 6-weight rod, and I've never hardly ever cast anybody else's rods, but I had the chance. If a customer came into the shop, he says, "You need to try this stick. It's a 6-weight," and I won't tell you the maker of it. And I was kind of excited to take a look at it, and so I went out and strung it up and went out, and I don't think I've ever been more disappointed, from my perspective,
Sure.
of what I wanted a rod to feel like and do. It just didn't work
Right.
for me. You know, I'm quirky probably. It just didn't work.
Right.
This guy loved it, so you know, kudos to him. Well, it got the wheels turning, and this was probably about a year ago or better. And so I went back and I looked at the original 7127 and looked at the patterns, and I started scratching my head and thinking, what the heck did I do that for? Why don't I just do this and this and this? Why did I do this and that and that?
Yeah.
And we had some new materials to play with. That game's always changing, it seems. And it was amazing because I think we took that pattern, I think we ran 2 or 3 samples, and the rod was done. And this is the result of it. It just came out really good. We slowered the 3rd section down in taper. We kept the thicker wall on it to hold some of that energy that's being stored in those walls. We have a new material that we use for the butt sections in all the rods now that still complements the design very well, and it just came out just a fantastic rod.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it. It's so much fun to take something like this rod and just bang the casts out with so little effort, and the fish feel good on it. It's been a good rod for us.
Well, you know, I'm with you. There's very few 6-weights, Spey rods that I've cast and liked.
Yeah.
This one, I loved it on the first cast. I was telling you about that earlier. You know, it's such an easy rod to cast. It's amazing. It's all I fish here locally now. I still have my 7134 that will cover everywhere. I take it as my backup on every trip I go to.
Sure.
But for the Grand Ron, I fish this pretty much exclusively. You know, when I first got into Spey casting and more steelhead oriented, I heard tons about Burkheimer Spey rods, but you've done a lot of single hand rods too.
A lot of single hand rods.
And I think from my conversations with you, your passion really lies in that trout fishing.
Yeah, it does too. And you know, yeah, not many people know that the Spey rod thing started in about 1988, 89 for us. And I had some two-handed rods prior to that we did not make. They were some, you know, Jimmy Green type stuff, which was pretty cool. Wish I still had those. But the trout stuff started literally in 1980. I grew up trout fishing. I get as much enjoyment out of fishing a small stream as I do going to BC. I'm sure that is strange for some people to hear, but it's true.
Right.
I can catch a 6 or 8 inch trout and just be delighted. It doesn't have to be, you know, 20 pounds. Although that would be nice. A trout would be good. I won't argue. But so it's so important, and we're still working on trout concepts all the time. We just did a streamer rod for a gentleman over in Montana. It's a pretty well-known streamer fisherman, and I kind of visited with him over the last couple of years and talked a little bit, and I sent him a couple samples. And we went and visited him here on the Madison just this last summer and handed him the rod, and he says, "God dang, how'd you do that? You know, how'd you do that?" And we went out and fished it, and it's one of the best streamer rods he's ever had. So there's a lot of passions to it there.
Right.
Small streams, I want to, our small rod, trout rod stuff cast, it really does cast the way that we want it to. So many of the rods are super fast. You don't want a fast rod for a small stream. Tight quarters, you have no back cast room. You want that rod to preload so that you just move the rod. You don't even, are not even officially loading it, and it can still cast. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about.
Sure. You know, personally for me, I've been against the super fast action rods. You know, I don't get the feedback that I want from the rod
Right.
with super fast action. It does make it easier for people to start casting because they
does.
can get that line out, but I don't think it helps them improve.
No.
And, I know we have a couple of the trout rods. We have some of the trout rods coming in here, and I got a couple from me personally coming. I have the new 4-weight trout spey
Sure.
coming in, and then the one I'm really excited about is the 4-weight, 8-foot, 9-foot deep action load.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that rod. A couple of friends have told me about that, and I'm going to head down with Dave Tucker to the Hawaii this spring.
Nice.
We're going to give that a whirl. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, you're going to get a workout there.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to share with us? I think we covered everything that I wanted to.
I mean, the whole idea of, I mean, when I started this business, I mean, I sat down, me, myself, and I put a pad of paper in front of me, and I had to legitimize, why am I starting a rod company? We already had big successful rod companies. What could we do to offer something new and unique and different? Of course, I came from the custom designing part. When I was working for the big companies and consulting for some of the big companies, we did a lot of projects that make the actions like this and this and this, and I was able to do that relatively easy. So the R&D wasn't, it was cost effective. It wasn't running people, deep into 6 figures for R&D projects. But when I started our own business, CF Burkheimer, the quality had to be there, and that was, I think, number one. And when we're building the grip, we're not using any preformed handles. Every cork is glued on, and then it's all hand shaped down. All the components have been designed by us, and we're having custom fabricated for us. So each point of the rod has a really hands-on aspect to it that you just don't see in this day and age anymore. In mass marketing in manufacturing. So if there's any pride to it besides just the way that things perform, there's a lot of love, and I got a fantastic crew that helps put these together. You don't have to watch every step, and they're watching every step.
Absolutely.
And it's a huge part of the business. And I think partially why we've been able to be in business as we have, as long as we have.
My wife and I were able to stop by your shop about 2 years ago, I think it was, and do a tour of it, and we were just blown away by how much everything is hand done.
Yeah.
The rods are hand rolled, they're hand wrapped, the cork's hand done, and that impressed us. And coming from a mass production perspective and selling things that have been mass produced, for you guys to do something all handmade and to be able to be competitive at the price against the other big manufacturers and beat the other manufacturers on price, we love the value of the rod.
Sure.
That's value and price are not the same thing. This is a high-priced rod, but it's not outvalued. I mean, this is the best value on the market.
Yeah.
And that's what we love about it. I mean, that's among everything else, And there's custom options for the people who really want to do things. There's the presentation in the vintage line.
Yeah.
I love the looks of the vintage line, but I love the looks of it so much I would never take it out fishing.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
That's for me. But we really appreciate you stopping in and sharing your story with us and talking about how you go about designing rods. And we're excited to keep doing more here.
Great, John. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks a lot, Katie.
Thank you. Take care.